The Mediterranean sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Rome's Fiumicino airport as the royal jet touched down on a crisp April morning in 1985. Inside the aircraft, Princess Diana adjusted her elegant navy blue suit and checked her reflection one final time. At 23, she had already captured the world attention with her grace and natural charm, but this trip to Italy would prove to be one of her most memorable international appearances. Prince Charles, seated beside his young wife, reviewed his notes for the upcoming diplomatic meetings. At 36, he carried the weight of royal tradition and protocol, yet even he couldn't deny the excitement building within him for this Italian adventure. The couple had been married for nearly 4 years, and their relationship, though complex, was about to be showcased against the romantic backdrop of Italy's most iconic cities. As the aircraft door opened, a warm breeze swept through the cabin, carrying with it the scent of Mediterranean herbs and the promise of unforgettable experiences. Diana took a deep breath, her blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. She had studied Italian art and culture extensively in preparation for this visit, and the opportunity to see masterpieces she had only admired in books filled her with genuine excitement. The Italian officials waiting on the red carpet were equally eager to welcome the British royals. Prime Minister Bettino Craxi himself had come to greet them, understanding the significance of this visit not just for diplomatic relations, but for the cultural exchange between two nations rich in history and tradition. The press corps, numbering in the hundreds, had positioned themselves strategically to capture every moment of the royal arrival. Diana emerged first, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she descended the steps with the poise that had made her an international icon. She wore a stunning sapphire brooch, a wedding gift from the Queen Mother, which complemented her outfit perfectly. The crowd of well-wishers who had gathered behind the barriers erupted in cheers, many calling out Principessa Diana in their musical Italian accents. Charles followed closely behind, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that spoke of Seville Row craftsmanship. His expression was serious, but warm as he acknowledged the welcoming committee with practiced royal waves. The contrast between the couple was immediately apparent to observers. Diana's natural spontaneity and Charles's measured formality created a dynamic that would define their entire Italian sojourn. The official welcome ceremony was brief but meaningful. As the Italian national anthem played, followed by God Save the Queen, Diana stood with perfect posture, her hands clasped in front of her, occasionally glancing at the enthusiastic crowd that had gathered to witness this historic moment. Charles maintained his composed demeanor, though those close to him noticed the subtle signs of his growing appreciation for the Italian welcome. After the formalities concluded, the royal couple was escorted to their waiting limousine, a sleek black vehicle adorned with both British and Italian flags. As they settled into the leather seats, Diana couldn't help but smile at the motorcycle escort that would accompany them through Rome's ancient streets. The Italian style of hospitality was already making an impression on her, from the passionate enthusiasm of the crowds to the obvious pride their hosts took in showcasing their magnificent country. The motorcade began its journey through Rome, taking a route carefully planned to showcase the city's most spectacular landmarks. As they passed the Colosseum, Diana pressed her face to the window like an excited tourist, her royal training momentarily forgotten in the face of such magnificent history. Charles, equally moved by the sight, pointed out architectural details he remembered from his classical education, sharing his knowledge with his wife in what observers would later describe as one of their most naturally intimate moments of the trip. The streets of Rome were lined with spectators, many of whom had taken the day off work simply to catch a glimpse of the fairy tale princess and her prince. Children waved small British flags while their parents snapped photographs with cameras that seemed primitive by today's standards but captured moments that would become treasured family heirlooms. The enthusiasm was infectious, and even the usually reserved Charles found himself waving more frequently than protocol typically demanded. Their first official stop was the Quirinal Palace, where they would meet with Italian President Francesco Cossiga. The palace, with its magnificent frescoed halls and priceless art collections, provided the perfect setting for the beginning of what would become a love affair between the British royals and Italian culture. Diana was particularly struck by the Pauline Chapel, where Guido Reni's magnificent ceiling fresco seemed to glow in the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. As they toured the palace, Diana's genuine interest in the art and history surrounding her was evident to everyone present. She asked thoughtful questions about the Renaissance masters whose works adorned the walls, and her enthusiasm was so authentic that even the typically formal Italian officials found themselves warming to her immediately. Charles, well-versed in art history himself, engaged in detailed discussions about the architectural elements of the palace, particularly its Baroque features. The day concluded with a private dinner at the British ambassador's residence, where a carefully selected group of Italian dignitaries and cultural leaders had been invited to meet the royal couple. The evening was intimate by royal standards, with only 30 guests seated around tables decorated with white roses and flickering candles that cast a warm glow throughout the elegant dining room. Diana wore a stunning off-the-shoulder gown in midnight blue, adorned with the Spencer family tiara that had become one of her signature pieces. The Italian guests were enchanted by her combination of regal bearing and approachable warmth. She conversed easily in her carefully practiced Italian phrases, delighting her dinner companions with her efforts to connect with them in their native language, even when her pronunciation wasn't perfect. Charles, meanwhile, engaged in animated discussions about Italian art patronage during the Renaissance, a subject that clearly fascinated him. His knowledge of Medici family history impressed even the Italian art historians present, and several noted later that the prince's passion for classical culture made him an ideal ambassador for British intellectual interests. As the evening wound down and the royal couple retired to their private suite, both Diana and Charles reflected on the warmth of their Italian welcome. The day had exceeded their expectations, setting the stage for what would become one of their most successful joint overseas tours. Neither could have imagined that the experiences they were about to share over the next several days would create memories that would last a lifetime, captured forever in photographs that would grace the pages of magazines and books for decades to come. #Royal Retrospective. Venice discovery. The gentle lapping of water against ancient stone greeted Princess Diana and Prince Charles as their water taxi glided through the Grand Canal toward Venice's heart. The morning mist was just beginning to lift, revealing the magnificent palazzos that lined the waterway like jewels in a crown. Diana had insisted on taking the water taxi rather than a more formal arrival, wanting to experience Venice as visitors had for centuries, approaching the floating city from its natural highway. Charles sat beside his wife, his usual formal demeanor softened by the magical atmosphere of Venice. He had visited the city once before as a young man, but seeing it through Diana's eyes was like discovering it anew. Her face lit up with wonder as they passed under the Rialto Bridge, and she pointed excitedly at the gondoliers who paused in their work to wave at the royal couple gliding past in their elegant water taxi. The British consul in Venice had arranged for their accommodation at the Gritti Palace, one of the city's most prestigious hotels, where they would stay in the royal suite overlooking the Grand Canal. As their boat approached the hotel's private landing, a small crowd of hotel staff and local dignitaries had gathered to welcome them. Diana stepped carefully from the boat onto the marble steps, her mint green suit perfectly complementing the azure waters of the canal. Their first official engagement was at the Doge's palace, where the mayor of Venice had arranged a private tour before the palace opened to the general public. Walking through the hall of the Great Council, Diana was mesmerized by Tintoretto's massive painting of Paradise, which covered the entire wall behind the ducal throne. Charles explained the political significance of the Doge's role in Venetian history, while Diana marveled at the artistic achievement represented by the enormous work of art. The Bridge of Sighs provided an unexpectedly romantic moment during their tour. As they stood in the enclosed walkway that connected the interrogation rooms in the Doge's palace with the new prison, Diana remarked on the bridge's famous legend about lovers who kiss while passing beneath it in a gondola being assured eternal love. Charles, typically reserved about such romantic notions, surprised everyone present by suggesting they might test the legend themselves later in the day. Their afternoon schedule included a visit to St. Mark's Basilica, where the Patriarch of Venice personally conducted their tour. Diana was particularly moved by the golden mosaics that covered every surface of the ancient church, creating an atmosphere that seemed to transport visitors back to the Byzantine era. She spent long minutes studying the Palla d'Oro, the magnificent golden altarpiece encrusted with precious gems, asking detailed questions about its creation and the meaning of its religious imagery. Charles found himself drawn to the basilica's architecture, particularly the way the Byzantine, Islamic, and Western European influences have been blended so seamlessly. He engaged in lengthy discussions with the Patriarch about the church's role in Venetian history and its connection to Constantinople, demonstrating the depth of his knowledge about medieval trade routes and cultural exchange. The highlight of their Venice visit came in the late afternoon when they accepted the mayor's invitation to take a private gondola ride through the smaller canals. Diana had changed into a flowing white dress that seemed to capture the golden light of the Venetian sunset, while Charles wore a navy blazer that gave him a more relaxed appearance than his usual formal attire. Their gondolier, chosen for his discretion and skill, navigated the narrow waterways with practiced ease. As they glided through canals barely wide enough for their gondola, Diana, trailing her fingers in the water, they encountered Venetians going about their daily lives. Children playing along the canal banks waved excitedly when they recognized the royal couple, while elderly residents sitting outside their homes called out greetings in rapid Italian. Diana waved back enthusiastically, her genuine pleasure at these spontaneous interactions evident to everyone who witnessed them. The gondola passed under several small bridges, including the famous Bridge of Sighs. As they approached, Charles surprised Diana by taking her hand, and they shared a brief, tender kiss as the gondola slipped beneath the stone arch. The moment was captured by a photographer positioned discreetly on a nearby bridge, creating one of the most romantic images of their marriage that would be treasured by royal watchers for years to come. Their evening in Venice concluded with a cultural performance at La Fenice Opera House, where they attended a special presentation of Vivaldi's Four Seasons performed by Musici, one of Italy's most celebrated chamber orchestras. Diana wore a spectacular emerald green gown with the Cambridge emeralds, a tiara that had belonged to Queen Mary, creating a striking figure in the opera house's royal box. The performance was magical, with the musicians clearly inspired by the presence of their royal audience. Diana closed her eyes during particularly beautiful passages, completely absorbed in the music that seemed to capture the essence of Venice itself. Charles, a devoted lover of classical music, appreciated the technical excellence of the performance, while also noting how the music seemed to reflect the changing moods of the Venetian lagoon throughout the seasons. During the intermission, they met with the musicians and the opera house's director, who presented them with a special recording of the evening's performance as a memento of their visit. Diana's genuine appreciation for the music and her warm interactions with the performers created an atmosphere of mutual respect and admiration that transcended the usual formality of royal cultural events. After the performance, they walked slowly back to their hotel through the nearly empty Piazza San Marco, their footsteps echoing against the ancient stones. The square, usually crowded with tourists during the day, had taken on a mystical quality in the moonlight. The Byzantine domes of St. Mark's Basilica seemed to glow against the dark sky, while the campanile stood sentinel over the sleeping city. Diana paused at the edge of the piazza to look back at the basilica one final time, knowing that this magical day in Venice would remain with her forever. Charles stood beside her, equally moved by the beauty of the moment and by his wife's obvious joy in their shared experience. The day had reminded them both of the cultural treasures that made Italy so special and had provided them with memories they would cherish long after their royal duties had taken them to far less romantic destinations. As they entered their hotel, the concierge informed them that hundreds of messages had arrived from well-wishers around the world who had seen photographs of their gondola ride. The images of the royal couple enjoying such a quintessentially Venetian experience had captured the public imagination, creating exactly the kind of positive publicity that successful royal tours were designed to generate. Yet for Diana and Charles, the day had been about much more than public relations. It had been about experiencing one of the world's most beautiful cities together and creating memories that transcended their official roles. Hashtag Royal Retrospective. Florence Renaissance. The train from Venice to Florence provided Princess Diana and Prince Charles with a rare opportunity to travel through the Italian countryside like ordinary passengers, albeit in a specially arranged private car. Diana pressed her face to the window as they passed through the rolling hills of Tuscany, exclaiming with delight at every vineyard, olive grove, and medieval hill town that came into view. Charles shared her enthusiasm, pointing out architectural features of the ancient settlements they passed and explaining the historical significance of the region's strategic location. Florence's Santa Maria Novella station was decorated with banners and flowers for their arrival. The mayor of Florence, accompanied by representatives from the city's most important cultural institutions, waited on the platform to greet the royal couple. Diana stepped from the train wearing a sophisticated coral-colored suit that seemed to complement the warm Tuscan sunshine, while Charles appeared relaxed and eager to explore the city that was considered the birthplace of the Renaissance. Their first destination was the Uffizi Gallery, where the director had arranged for a private viewing before the museum opened to the public. Walking through the corridors lined with masterpieces, Diana found herself standing before Botticelli's Birth of Venus, a painting she had studied extensively but never seen in person. The scale and beauty of the work left her speechless for several minutes, and she later confessed that seeing the original made her understand why Florence was considered the heart of Renaissance art. Charles was equally moved by their visit to the Uffizi, particularly when they reached the room containing Leonardo da Vinci's Annunciation. His knowledge of Renaissance art history allowed him to engage in detailed discussions with the museum's curators about the techniques and innovations that made these works so revolutionary. Diana listened intently as he explained the significance of perspective and sfumato in Da Vinci's work, her respect for her husband's scholarship evident in her attentive expression. The royal couple spent nearly 3 hours in the Uffizi, far longer than their schedule originally allowed, but neither could bear to leave such treasures behind. Diana was particularly drawn to the portraits, fascinated by how artists like Piero della Francesca and Andrea Mantegna had captured not just the physical appearance of their subjects, but their personalities as well. She stood for a long time before Durer's Adoration of the Magi, marveling at the intricate detail and the way the artist had used light to create drama and meaning. Their afternoon was devoted to exploring Florence's architectural treasures, beginning with the Duomo. Climbing to the top of Brunelleschi's magnificent dome proved to be an adventure that neither had anticipated. Diana, despite wearing heels unsuitable for climbing narrow Renaissance staircases, insisted on making the entire ascent. Charles worried about the propriety of the Princess of Wales huffing and puffing up ancient stone steps, but Diana's determination to see the city from the dome's peak was unwavering. The view from the top of the dome was spectacular, offering a panoramic vista of Florence's terracotta rooftops stretching to the surrounding hills. Diana pointed excitedly at landmarks they could identify from their elevated perspective, while Charles used his knowledge of the city's layout to explain how Florence had grown and changed since the Renaissance. The wind at that height playfully disturbed Diana's carefully arranged hair, but she laughed with pure joy at the experience, creating a moment of spontaneous happiness that delighted their small entourage. Their visit to the Palazzo Pitti provided another opportunity to immerse themselves in Renaissance culture. The Palatine Gallery housed one of the world's finest collections of Renaissance and Baroque art, including works by Raphael, Titian, and Rubens that took their breath away. Diana was particularly moved by Raphael's Madonna of the Chair, studying the tender expression on the Virgin's face and the way the artist had captured the intimate bond between mother and child. The Boboli Gardens behind the Pitti Palace offered a welcome respite from the intensity of art appreciation. Walking through the formal Italian gardens with their geometric patterns and classical sculptures provided a perfect opportunity for Diana and Charles to reflect on what they had seen and learned during their day in Florence. Diana removed her shoes to walk barefoot on the grass, a gesture that would have been unthinkable at a formal royal engagement, but seemed perfectly natural in the relaxed atmosphere of the gardens. Their evening in Florence began with a private dinner hosted by the mayor at the Palazzo Vecchio, where they dined in the magnificent Salone dei Cinquecento beneath Vasari's frescoes depicting Florence's military victories. The dinner guests included prominent Florentine art historians, museum directors, and cultural leaders who were eager to share their knowledge and passion for their city's artistic heritage with the royal visitors. Diana's genuine curiosity about Renaissance art and her thoughtful questions impressed everyone present. She asked about the daily lives of artists like Michelangelo and Donatello, wanting to understand not just their artistic achievements, but how they lived and worked in Renaissance Florence. Her approach to learning about art through understanding the artists themselves as human beings revealed a depth of interest that went far beyond mere royal duty. Charles contributed his own extensive knowledge to the dinner conversations, particularly about the Medici family's role as art patrons and their influence on Renaissance culture. His discussions with Italian art historians revealed new insights about the connections between Florentine Renaissance art and similar movements in Northern Europe, demonstrating the international scope of his cultural interests. After dinner, they were given a private evening tour of the Bargello Museum, where they could view Donatello's sculptures by specially arranged lighting that highlighted details invisible during regular viewing hours. Diana was mesmerized by Donatello's David, the first freestanding nude sculpture created since antiquity, while Charles engaged in lengthy discussions about the technical innovations that made such work possible. The evening concluded with a surprise visit to a traditional Florentine artisan workshop, where master craftsmen demonstrated techniques that had been passed down through generations since the Renaissance. Diana tried her hand at gold leaf application under the patient guidance of a master gilder, while Charles observed the process of creating hand-marbled paper, an art form that had flourished in Florence for centuries. Watching Diana concentrate intensely on applying delicate gold leaf to a small wooden panel provided one of the most charming moments of their entire Italian tour. Her tongue stuck out slightly in concentration, her royal composure forgotten in her determination to master the ancient technique. The craftsman guiding her hands was clearly delighted by her genuine interest and her willingness to learn from his expertise. As they returned to their hotel late that evening, both Diana and Charles felt they had experienced something truly special in Florence. The city had revealed its treasures to them, not just as royal visitors, but as genuine lovers of art and culture. Their shared appreciation for what they had seen and learned created a bond between them that transcended their formal roles, reminding them of the interests and values that had originally brought them together. The day in Florence had been more than a cultural education. It had been a journey through some of humanity's greatest artistic achievements, experienced in the company of people who understood and cherished those achievements. For Diana, it had been a revelation of how art could speak across centuries, while for Charles, it had been a confirmation of his belief that cultural understanding was essential for meaningful international relationships. Together, they had discovered that Florence's Renaissance treasures were not just historical artifacts, but living expressions of human creativity that continued to inspire and uplift all who encountered them. #Royal Retrospective. Roman holiday Rome welcomed Princess Diana and Prince Charles back with the enthusiasm of old friends returning home. The ancient city seemed to have embraced the royal couple during their brief initial visit, and their return for a longer exploration felt like a homecoming rather than a formal state occasion. The morning sun painted the eternal city in golden hues as their motorcade wound through streets that had witnessed over 2 millennia of history, from Caesar's triumphs to the present day. Their first destination was Vatican City, where Pope John Paul II had arranged a private audience in the Apostolic Palace. Diana wore an elegant black dress with a traditional mantilla, the required attire for papal audiences, while Charles appeared in formal morning dress with his diplomatic decorations. The meeting with the Pope proved to be deeply moving for both of them, as the Holy Father's warmth and genuine interest in their charitable work created an atmosphere of mutual respect that transcended religious differences. During their audience, the Pope presented Diana with a special rosary blessed for her charitable endeavors, particularly her work with sick children. Charles received a rare Vatican medallion commemorating Christian unity, reflecting the Pope's appreciation for the prince's efforts to build bridges between different faith communities. The private conversation, conducted in a mixture of English and Italian, covered topics ranging from their shared concerns about global poverty to their mutual interest in preserving cultural heritage. Following their papal audience, they were given an exclusive tour of the Sistine Chapel, where they stood alone beneath Michelangelo's magnificent ceiling frescoes. Diana laid down on the chapel floor, just as Michelangelo had done while painting the ceiling, to truly appreciate the master's perspective and the physical challenges he had overcome. Charles joined her on the marble floor, and together they gazed upward at scenes from Genesis that seemed to come alive in the soft light filtering through the chapel's high windows. The Vatican museums provided an overwhelming display of artistic treasures accumulated over centuries of papal patronage. Diana was particularly moved by the ancient Roman sculptures in the Pio Clementine Museum, while Charles found himself drawn to the Renaissance tapestries designed by Raphael. Their Vatican guide, a distinguished art historian, was impressed by their knowledge and genuine curiosity, noting later that few visitors had asked such insightful questions about the collections. Their afternoon in Rome began with a visit to the Colosseum, where they descended to the underground chambers where gladiators had once prepared for combat. Standing in the ancient arena, Diana tried to imagine the spectacles that had taken place there, while Charles reflected on the complex relationship between entertainment and violence in Roman society. The contrast between the Colosseum's magnificent architecture and its brutal history provided a sobering reminder of civilization's capacity for both greatness and cruelty. A surprise addition to their itinerary came when they visited a neighborhood in Trastevere, where local residents had organized an impromptu street festival in their honor. Diana delighted the crowd by accepting an invitation to dance the tarantella with local children, her laughter ringing through the narrow cobblestone streets as she tried to follow the traditional steps. Charles, initially hesitant, eventually joined in the festivities, his usual reserve melting away in the face of the Romans' infectious enthusiasm. The children in Trastevere were particularly enchanted by Diana, who sat with them on the church steps to hear their stories and admire their drawings of the royal visit. She practiced her Italian with patient young teachers who giggled at her pronunciation, but praised her efforts enthusiastically. Charles engaged the adults in conversations about Roman history and contemporary life, his genuine interest in their daily experiences, creating connections that went far beyond formal diplomatic protocol. Their evening featured a state dinner at the Quirinal Palace, where President Cossiga had assembled Italy's most distinguished political and cultural leaders. Diana wore a stunning burgundy gown with the George VI sapphire tiara, creating a regal presence that perfectly complemented the palace's magnificent state dining room. The dinner menu featured specialties from different Italian regions, allowing the royal couple to experience the country's diverse culinary traditions. During the dinner, Diana's table companions included several prominent Italian women leaders, and her conversations with them about women's roles in contemporary society revealed her growing awareness of gender issues that would later become central to her public advocacy. Charles engaged in discussions about European unity and cultural cooperation, topics that were particularly relevant given the ongoing development of European community relationships. The entertainment following dinner featured a performance by the Rome Opera Company of selections from Verdi's Aida, performed in the palace's private theater. The dramatic music and staging created an unforgettable experience that seemed to embody the passion and artistry for which Italy was renowned worldwide. Diana was visibly moved by the performances, particularly the soprano's rendition of O Patria Mia, while Charles appreciated the technical excellence of the orchestra and the historical significance of experiencing Verdi in his homeland. A late evening stroll through Rome's illuminated streets provided an unexpected opportunity for the royal couple to experience the city's legendary Dolce Vita atmosphere. Walking hand in hand through the Piazza Navona, they admired Bernini's fountains by moonlight while enjoying gelato from a vendor who had remained open late, hoping to serve the royal visitors. The informality of the moment, captured by photographers positioned discreetly around the square, created some of the most beloved images of their Italian tour. Their walk continued to the Trevi Fountain, where they participated in the traditional ritual of throwing coins into the water to ensure their return to Rome. Diana threw her coin with her right hand over her left shoulder, making a wish that she playfully refused to reveal, despite Charles's good-natured attempts to convince her. The fountain's Baroque magnificence, illuminated against the dark Roman night, provided a romantic backdrop for photographs that would grace the covers of magazines around the world. The final stop on their Roman evening was the Spanish Steps, where they climbed to the top for a panoramic view of the sleeping city. Diana had removed her heels to climb the 135 steps more comfortably, and Charles carried them for her, a gallant gesture that was noted appreciatively by the Italian press. At the top, they stood quietly for several minutes, taking in a view of Rome's ancient and modern landmarks spread out below them like a living map of Western civilization. Their return to the hotel came after midnight, both of them reluctant to end what had been an extraordinary day of cultural immersion and personal connection with the Roman people. Diana kicked off her shoes in the hotel lobby and walked barefoot across the marble floor, her carefree attitude reflecting the joy she had found in experiencing Rome as both a princess and a young woman discovering one of the world's great cities. Charles paused at the hotel's concierge desk to write personal thank you notes to several of the people who had made their day so memorable, from the Vatican guides to the children in Trastevere who had shared their drawings with Diana. His gesture reflected the genuine appreciation he felt for the warmth and hospitality they had encountered throughout their Roman adventure. As they prepared to retire for the evening, both Diana and Charles reflected on how Rome had exceeded all their expectations. The Eternal City had revealed its treasures generously, from the spiritual heights of the Sistine Chapel to the joyful humanity of a neighborhood street festival. They had experienced history, art, spirituality, and simple human connection in a single day, creating memories that would sustain them through many future challenges and remind them of the cultural bridges that unite people across national boundaries. #Royal Retrospective. The farewell, the final morning of Princess Diana and Prince Charles's Italian tour dawned with the soft light of spring filtering through the windows of their Roman hotel suite. Both had awakened early, not from any official obligation, but from a mutual reluctance to let their extraordinary Italian adventure come to an end. Diana sat by the window overlooking the city, still wearing her silk nightgown, watching the Eternal City come to life as vendors set up their stalls and early commuters began their daily journeys through streets that had witnessed empires rise and fall. Charles joined her at the window, both of them sharing a comfortable silence as they absorbed their final moments of waking up in Italy. The past week had transformed them both in ways they were only beginning to understand. Diana had discovered a depth of cultural appreciation she hadn't known she possessed, while Charles had rediscovered the joy of sharing his scholarly passions with someone who genuinely wanted to learn. Their shared experiences had created a bond that transcended their often complicated relationship. Their final official engagement was a visit to a children's hospital in Rome, where Diana's natural affinity with sick children would provide one of the most touching moments of their entire tour. Wearing a simple yellow dress that seemed to bring sunshine into the hospital corridors, Diana moved from bed to bed, spending time with each young patient and their families. Her ability to connect with children facing serious illnesses had already become legendary, but in the Italian hospital, surrounded by families speaking rapid Italian mixed with broken English, Her compassion transcended all language barriers. Charles accompanied his wife through the hospital wards, observing with growing admiration how she instinctively knew exactly what each child needed, whether it was a gentle touch, a silly joke, or simply someone to listen to their fears and dreams. One little boy, recovering from heart surgery, showed Diana a drawing he had made of her dancing in Trastevere, which he had seen on television the night before. Diana's eyes filled with tears as she carefully studied every crayon mark, promising to treasure the picture forever. The hospital visit revealed Diana's growing confidence in her public role and her natural instinct for the kind of hands-on charity work that would later define her legacy. Charles watched as she sat on hospital beds, held children's hands, and spoke with parents in her carefully practiced Italian phrases, noting how her genuine emotion and empathy created connections that no amount of formal royal training could have taught. Their departure from the hospital was delayed when Diana insisted on visiting every ward, including the intensive care unit where the sickest children were fighting for their lives. Her presence brought comfort not just to the young patients, but to their parents, who found hope in her obvious care for their children's well-being. Charles stood quietly beside her as she held the hand of a little girl who was too sick to speak, both of them understanding that they were witnessing something precious and profound. The afternoon was devoted to a final cultural experience, a private viewing of the recently restored frescoes in the Villa Giulia, home to Italy's most important Etruscan collection. Diana had specifically requested this visit after learning about the ancient civilization that had preceded the Romans in central Italy. Walking through rooms filled with Etruscan art and artifacts, she marveled at the sophisticated culture that had flourished in Italy centuries before Christ, asking countless questions about their daily lives, religious beliefs, and artistic traditions. Charles shared her fascination with the Etruscans, particularly their advanced understanding of engineering and their influence on early Roman culture. Together, they studied the famous Apollo of Veii, discussing how the sculpture's smile seemed to bridge the gap between ancient and modern sensibilities. Their guide, an elderly archaeologist who had devoted his life to Etruscan studies, was charmed by their genuine interest and their thoughtful questions about connections between ancient cultures and contemporary life. The visit to Villa Giulia provided a perfect metaphor for their Italian journey, the discovery of hidden treasures that revealed unexpected depths and connections. Just as the Etruscans had laid the foundation for Roman greatness, Diana and Charles had discovered that their shared intellectual curiosity could provide a foundation for their own relationship that transcended the pressures and expectations of their public roles. Their final evening in Italy featured a private dinner with a small group of the people who had made their tours so memorable. The Vatican guide who had brought the Sistine Chapel to life, the children from Trastevere who had taught Diana the tarantella, the craftsmen in Florence who had shared their ancient techniques, and the hospital staff who had witnessed Diana's compassionate nature. The intimate gathering created an atmosphere more like a family farewell than a formal state occasion. Diana wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress with pearls, choosing to look approachable rather than intimidatingly formal for this final evening with their new Italian friends. Charles appeared equally relaxed in a casual blazer, his usual stiff public demeanor replaced by the warmth and enthusiasm he had rediscovered during their Italian adventure. The evening's conversations flowed between English and Italian, with frequent laughter and the kind of genuine affection that develops when people have shared meaningful experiences together. The dinner guests presented Diana and Charles with a collection of small, personal gifts that would mean far more to them than any official state presents. The Florentine craftsman gave Diana a small panel decorated with the gold leaf technique she had attempted to learn, while the Vatican guide presented Charles with a rare book about Renaissance art that had been privately printed for serious scholars. Each gift represented a connection that had developed naturally during their tour, transforming formal encounters into genuine friendships. As the evening concluded, their Italian friends accompanied them to their hotel, where a small crowd had gathered to bid them farewell. The scene was spontaneous and heartfelt, with people calling out wishes for their safe journey and expressions of hope that they would return soon to Italy. Diana and Charles moved through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting flowers from well-wishers who had come to genuinely care about these royal visitors who had shown such respect for Italian culture and such warmth toward Italian people. The final morning brought the inevitable return to protocol and formality, as their departure from Rome required official ceremonies and diplomatic courtesies. Diana wore a striking red coat dress with a matching hat, creating a bold, confident image for their farewell photographs. Charles appeared in his formal travel attire, but observers noted that his expression retained the relaxed happiness that had characterized much of their Italian tour. At the airport, Italian officials presented them with official gifts from the Italian government, including a magnificent Renaissance-style jewelry box for Diana and a rare manuscript about Italian architecture for Charles. The exchange of gifts and formal speeches seemed almost anticlimactic after the personal connections they had formed throughout their tour, but both Diana and Charles understood the importance of maintaining diplomatic traditions even as they cherished the more intimate memories they were taking home. As their aircraft taxied for departure, Diana pressed her face to the window one final time, watching the Italian countryside disappear beneath the clouds. She clutched the drawing from the little boy in the hospital, along with a small collection of other mementos that represented the human connections she had made during their remarkable week in Italy. Charles sat beside her, reviewing notes he had taken throughout their tour, already planning how he might incorporate what he had learned into his future cultural and charitable endeavors. The return flight to London provided time for both of them to reflect on how their Italian experience had changed them individually and as a couple. They had discovered shared interests and values that had been overshadowed by the pressures of their public roles and had proven to themselves and the world that they could work together as effective ambassadors for British culture and values. Most importantly, they had experienced the joy of learning and discovering together, creating memories that would sustain them through future challenges. Italy had given them more than beautiful sights and cultural treasures. It had given them a glimpse of who they could be when freed from the constraints of rigid protocol and allowed to follow their natural curiosity and compassion. As their aircraft flew through the afternoon sky toward home, both Diana and Charles carried with them not just souvenirs and photographs, but a renewed appreciation for the transformative power of cultural exchange and human connection that would influence their approach to royal duties for years to come.